Tell us about your journey, Blue Planet Asia. How did it start, and why waste management for you?
See, we are a fairly young 6-year-old company headquartered in Singapore. When we started Blue Planet, the reason behind focusing on this sector was mainly because it's a very fragmented sector. And there are people engaged from the point of collection to transportation to final disposal or upcycling. Anywhere between 3 to 6 people are involved in solving the problem. And that became the biggest bottleneck when we started evaluating the sector. So we saw a huge potential and opportunity to bring an integrated solution for waste management. And once we build that integrated platform, deploying technology for upcycling or processing was the key differentiator for us. Because that is how we came up with our vision of zero to landfill.
Okay.
So we don't. For us, waste is not a waste; it's a resource, and the right amount of value recovery is yet to happen for all the waste which is lying around us. And once you top that with with the whole fabric of ESG mandated execution, that brings a very solid foundation for a circular economy ecosystem.
Okay. So tell me, as a commercial entity, when you talk about mining this waste, so whatever you make out of mining the waste, whether it's e-waste or otherwise, is that like the cherry on the top for you, or it's part of what you work into your proposals when you're bidding for a project?
It depends. So basically, when I say resource recovery, it's not only financial monetization.
Right.
It's also to do with the whole resource optimization,
Okay.
so that which can help us avoid our dependence on virgin materials.
Okay.
As well,
So
which
it's
is good for the
recycling
environment, right?
okay.
Which is good for the environment. And of course, especially for growing economies like India and other countries in Southeast Asia, the affordability is definitely a big variable which we need to address to make it a viable business model.
Sure.
Which can be scalable. So that has been our challenge for the sector, where a lot of efforts have been made, a lot of investments have come in, but unfortunately those process technologies and businesses were not able to scale it up to global and international standards because they couldn't solve that whole net positive impact story, right? Where you have to solve it for people, planet, and the prosperity for all stakeholders.
So it's interesting you mentioned affordability. Would that mean that, like, typically we look to the West, especially at least in waste management, in terms of benchmarks, that this is the level you want to achieve, but all that comes at a certain cost, which probably is not viable many times in this part of the world. Does that mean you've been developing your own methods, which could actually be reverse engineered back to the more developed markets also? Does that give you an advantage?
No, absolutely. See, we are building a regional business, but for the global market, right? So many of our technologies, like we are in landfill mining, we are already the largest player in Asia, and we are already talking to multiple developed economies where we can deploy our solutions. And it would be tough to comprehend, but around 80% of our process and technology that we'll deploy in a developed country is exactly the same that we are deploying in India.
Great.
Okay, so we are not cutting corners to make sure that because it's India, we need to set a different rule. We are because we are making this business ready for future. And future will have a very different parameters as far as standards is concerned, and the expectation from be it municipality and be it our consumers are concerned.
Tell me, in India, our understanding has been that when it comes to waste management, we are well behind many other markets, the developed markets. Is that changing now? And even within Asia, do you see markets which are far ahead, or is there potential for India to catch up quite quickly now in terms of action on the ground?
See, India, if you look at it, this sector really started evolving around 8 to 10 years back. Right, where a lot of policies started to form up, where a lot of tailwind for the sector started to emerge. And but having said that, with the scale and the quantum of the challenge, I think we are just scratching the surface right now. We have a long journey ahead of us. But I would say, apart from the challenges, this can become a huge opportunity for our net zero journey that we have envisioned over the next 50 years,
Okay.
right? With our middle class growing 2x in the next 25 years. With the development, it will come with a lot of disposable income coming along, with the next generation of youths asking the right questions. So I think the opportunity is tremendous, and the whole circular economy consumption, unless and until we bring sustainable consumption into the ecosystem, we will not be able to make a dent, a sustainable dent, which for the next decades to come.
Again, I'll come back to this whole area of waste management. It's typically seen, obviously, it's unglamorous. It's not at all something that presumably occupies the top of the mind awareness for the CEO of a large global firm or even governments for that matter. It's traditionally not been, nobody seems to be aware of it. Media doesn't cover it as well because who's going to go to the waste site and actually see what's happening there, right? Does that, for somebody who's operating in that sector, does that force you to relook how you are trying to do things? Because, for example, you might want things to move very fast, but because you're dealing with municipalities, the government, they simply won't move fast enough. How do you manage that kind of dichotomy as a private dynamic company now?
No, absolutely. I think that you brought a very interesting point, and that is something that we is the battle we keep on fighting day in, day out. Being the non-glamorous part of the industry sector, be it IT and AI, ML, everyone is talking about. But as far as the impact is concerned, right, making a positive impact to our environments, to our societies, to our lives at large, the youths and future generations are much more aware. Right. So if you, the more what we are seeing is it was very difficult, let's say 10 years back, to attract and retain right talent, right, for our sector.
Sure.
But over the last decade, what we have seen is people are more passionate about it, right? So if we give them the right opportunity, if we can give them the freedom and autonomy to make an impact, I think they want to engage in building the right solution, not from their heart, right? So I think we would see a lot more people getting engaged in a more solution-driven approach rather than anything else as far as climate change and waste management is concerned.
So, speaking of talent, is there any special skill set you need which is more difficult to find in India or elsewhere, or is that like again an opportunity for us to export people or jobs, so to say?
No, see, I think green skilling is talk of the town over the last 5-7 years, right? But unfortunately, it is easier said than done, both because it's a chicken and egg situation, right? No one would train people, keep them ready if the industry has not evolved. So I think both the industry evolution and the availability of talent has to go hand in hand. But having said that, what we are seeing is there is enough amount of right, passionate folks who want to get engaged and make a difference in whatever capability they might. And because of our breadth of our offerings, I think from technology to operations to ESG and sustainability, I think there is enough and more specific roles that people get engaged on a regular basis.
Prashant, you've grown a lot with acquisitions, right? You have a whole string of acquisitions right from the time you started off within a couple of years of that. Tell us about the philosophy behind the companies you acquire. What are you looking at typically?
See, for us, in order to build a platform, I think our strategy has been buy and build. Okay, so because of the sector and the problem that we are trying to solve for, it takes a lot of time, energy, resources, and money to build businesses from scratch. And most importantly, it could take a decade to build maybe a small fraction of the business that we have been able to accomplish in the last 4 years, right? So the time to market, exploring synergies, and making sure that the 1 plus 1 should be more than 2 is the philosophy of the consolidation and roll-up that we believe in, which has yielded phenomenal results so far. We have closed 13 acquisitions in the last 5 years. Presence in 6 countries now. We are number 2 waste management company in Singapore. We are one of the fastest growing company in Malaysia for industrial waste. For landfill mining, we are by far the largest player in Asia. For CBG, which is compressed biogas from organic waste to biogas plants, we have installed more than 140 plants in 15 countries from US, Canada, Europe, Asia, and Southeast and Africa as well. So a significant feat we have, and in that journey we have processed more than 13 million tons of waste and avoided more than 7 million tons of CO2 emissions going into the environment.
So between all these segments you just mentioned, any particular segment you want to highlight in terms of prospects for the future? Much higher?
See, I think depending. So if you talk about India, I think the 2-3 areas where we see a lot of potential for growth. One is landfill mining, absolutely. Although we are by far the largest player, but we still see that there's a lot of growth which will come from the landfill part of the business. There's a lot of standardization that has to happen. There is a lot of policy enforcement on the ground needs to happen, so that people don't interpret rules, guidelines, regulations as per their convenience. And that is something which will also help us as a sector to attract the right capital, patient capital from global funds or sovereign wealth funds and stuff like that. The second is integrated waste management, for fresh waste, so that we can focus more on processing, focus more on making sure that we do source aggregation, and once we do source aggregate, how to build the mindset of processing and upcycling, so that as less amount of waste goes to the landfill as possible. So that big again, and CBG is again one of the areas which we are very, very bullish on.
Is there something unique about the waste management sector in terms of the tenure of contract or how payments are made? I'm just curious to know, is there a difference there? Like in power, we have a 25-year PPA, right? There might be an escalation clause, there may not be one. How are these contracts structured typically?
So it depends on which way. So within the waste, as I said, we have industrial waste, we have plastic waste, we have municipal waste, landfill waste. So every kind of stream of waste or the business will drive its own business model. Like for example, landfill mining business, we focus mainly on the per ton kind of a waste being processed, segregate, pre-treated, processed, and sustainably disposed. The end-to-end ecosystem for a landfill management solution there. There, the business model is mainly driven by tripping fees that the municipality pays. But when we talk about, we closed a couple of orders in southern part of India, in Kerala, where we are building an integrated waste management park, waste park for one of the cities for 7, 8 lakh, 10 lakh population, where 200 tons of waste will get collected, transported, processed, and upcycled by us. And we commit that 90% of the waste will get processed or upcycled, and only 10% will go to the landfill. So this is a true sustainable, and which is a 25-year contract. So that is where where we clear the landfill, and for the fresh waste, we give a commitment that 90% of the waste gets processed, and we don't depend on landfill anymore.
So you had mentioned patient capital earlier. So obviously, I know you've got a sovereign fund which is also invested in your firm, but you've also got VCs, you've got private equity funds also. How are they looking at the business? How do they, do they have the same expectations, or do they have more tempered expectations? Why would they invest in your business?
See, the whole concept of PE funds philosophy has also evolved over the last 10 years or so, right? Doing good while doing well is the fundamental that most of these PE funds also believe in now, right? So if you have the right set of governance mechanisms, right a mindset for sustainable growth that you can demonstrate, and you are taking care of your employees and your ecosystem, being flexible and more forgiving for the aggressive returns that they were used to,
Right.
they will be more comfortable with that. Okay, but the reverse is not true anymore, right? So if you are giving me a couple of percentage point more returns, but you are putting all these ESG aspects and stuff out of your window, is definitely not the investment thesis that I would say 8 out of the top 10 global PE funds will be focusing on. So it is no more a hygiene to make sure that ESG mandated companies or belief is just a kind of a fad. That is a reality that all of us are living today.
Okay. We've heard a few deals every now and then, maybe till last year, probably say once in 6 months, about some municipal corporation in a small city earning carbon credits from its waste management in some way. Is that just tip of the iceberg, so to say? Do you think earning money from waste by doing what you're doing in the right way, is that going to be a revenue center for these bodies?
See, again, it will be a long journey because it is not a resource where it can become a profit center. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Right. So that is a misconception that many of us believe in India, and there is a reason behind it. Right. In terms of how we as consumers live our lifestyle. Right. I think we believe that our job is not to worry about the waste. It's municipality's job, right?
Sure.
So the sense of ownership doesn't belong to me. It's somebody else's problem to solve for, right? And that is very, very different when we talk about resource maximization in developed countries, because they believe that it's if polluters to pay model is where if I generate the waste, it's my responsibility to dispose of sustainably, or if I'm not able to do that, to pay to so that it can be disposed of sustainably. In India, we are still at a very, very nascent stages of creating that awareness to make sure that source aggregation and stuff gets into foray, and where the right resource monetization can happen. But again, it's a very long journey ahead. And that is where in one of the programs that we launched is called Blue Nudge program, right? So if you said we are landfill mining, we are by far largest fresh waste. We have multiple projects which we have implemented. We didn't stop there. What we also did was we reached out to youths of future, right? In Delhi NCR itself, we reached out to 300,000 kids.
Okay.
And we broke a Guinness Book of Record 2 months back by collecting maximum amount of paper waste in 24 hours. Okay, which award used to be in San Diego.
Okay.
We brought it back to India, Bharat Ka Apna record, and that created a huge amount of awareness within kids. Right, I mean, so many people who hear me, and I was there in the session by ET Now 2 days back, and some guy came and they said, "Yeah, you are the guys doing that amazing job," because his second grader, he was running around and collecting all the paper waste from his community to bring it to some kind of a passion that he can do. It's second grader, right? So imagine the kind of impact that it would create in their lifespan. So this is how a true circular economy ecosystem gets built up, where you complete the loop, right? In terms of, you said carbon credit, that will be one of the variables where monetization will happen, but that in its isolation, I don't think so it will be a problem solver. It will be one of the maybe half a dozen variables which will make the business model viable.
So what's the 5-year vision for Blue Planet now?
So I think we are, I would say, as far as building the integrated platform, we are very much there. I would say 78. We are still looking for a few key technologies for battery recycling. We are looking, e-waste is one of the key focus areas for us. Tire recycling is one of, so we still have a few more kind of opportunity areas for us. But now in the next 2 to 5 years, main focus would be on growth and scaling it up. Right. So right now it was last 4 or 5 years was building the platform. We just closed one of the largest order in landfill mining in India, in Chennai, phase 2 of Chennai. And again, so the impact is increasing significantly, and that hockey stick growth is what we are aspiring to achieve in the next 5 years.
Final question. You spoke about this not being the typical glamorous business. Have you ever struggled to explain what you do to a normal person on the ground? And what's the simplest one-liner you've used, possibly?
So for waste, I think whenever you try to communicate with people, no one on this earth can say that they have not generated waste.
Sure.
Right. So if you try to communicate to them that waste that you create, which might not be useful to you, is useful to somebody else in the ecosystem. So please be a little bit more cautious and aware about the waste that you create, so that it becomes a little bit better, useful product for somebody else in the ecosystem. So and what we do is exactly the same, because you guys are not doing your individual jobs properly. Is what we are trying to do our job by making sure that byproduct or the waste that you generate becomes a useful product for somebody or someone or somewhere in the ecosystem, be it for the environment, for people, or humanity at large.
Sure. Okay. Thanks a lot.